So, I have some thoughts to share on the subject of shame. Yes, the subject that Brene Brown made famous in 2000, what was it, 11, 13, something like that. And then sort of has just become a word that kind of passes through and we don't think about it anymore. It used to be kind of a taboo word and now it's just yeah, there's shame. But some events in my life in the last month or so have really brought that into focus. And in the process of my processing, I've really become clear um, how this was baked in to so many of the belief systems and values and what was called culture of my family system, extended family system, intergenerational, etc. So I feel like as I talk about this, which I don't have a big script or anything. I just have a few points that I'm going to try to make. So let's see if I can do it. I feel like if you have been following me from the very beginning of this channel, you will know that it started with Bad Asian Daughter. That was made, those videos were made at a time when I was just waking up to one at a time through Byron Katie thought work and Martha Beck life coach training and just the whole awakening that happened in that period of my life. One by one, the lies that I had taken to be universal truths or even values were becoming clear to me, and I was given permission and took permission for myself to actually examine them. So many of those videos, which I'm still really, really grateful that I made because they were totally spontaneous. I would turn on a handheld at the time Kodak PlaySport video camera as I was hiking and just talk about what was happening for me. So I feel like I'm channeling my earlier Bad Asian Daughter self and putting on the Bad Asian Daughter hat to speak about the subject of shame again here in 2022. Um, and the situation is, I had an uncle die. This is my mom's brother, and my mom died in 2020. And so this is 2 years later. This is her younger brother. And just to summarize, this whole event has led to me interacting with my cousin, so within the generation, and we had some very vulnerable, real, true conversations that I really felt very good about. I felt just in my body and intuitively that we were interacting as adults. And that was really encouraging because that doesn't really happen in my family. People don't speak from their hearts, mainly because it wasn't allowed. And I'll speak more about that in a minute. And also because of shame being the glue that holds the family together, there cannot be any vulnerability among people within that glued together system if it's held together by shame. So when there's no vulnerability, there's no connection, there's no community, there's roles. There's like, and that's, if you know, I'm just going to speak to my culture. I'm not going to generalize. So my background is Chinese, Taiwanese, American. And in those cultures, it's like everyone has a specific role and name that describes their exact relationship to one another. So these are very embedded in the culture, that interconnected. And I don't even want to say interconnected in the sense of interbeing, but roles that everyone knows their place. So this is slightly different from interbeing because interbeing to me has a very reciprocal quality where there's an awareness that, like the Ubuntu of I am because you are. And it's a very, to me, mutual, equal kind of feeling to it, interbeing. That they're of equal importance, and there's no hierarchy within the idea of interbeing. But this role structure I'm talking about is a clear hierarchy that is reflected in, or is reflected by, or was described by the Confucian idea of everyone older than you or more male in gender than you has authority. Doesn't matter who you are. And I've talked about this before. I think it's a scene in my one woman show, actually, where I explain Confucianism in 30 seconds. But basically, it's if you know your place, then you stay there. And so to always be conscious of your place in this hierarchy, and it's a ladder of importance, male over female and older over younger, always. And don't let anyone tell you deny that because it's absolutely true, and it's the way it's set up. And so knowing your role and staying in that role based on shame, because if you step out of the role, you are shaming the entire system of which you are a part. That's not part of interbeing. So when a tree falls in the forest, they're not shaming the rest of the trees. Okay, when something sheds its leaves, it's not shaming the rest of the tree. So that's the difference. And I'm not going to go too deep, much more deeply into that concept, but I think it's important to form a picture in our minds of the difference between hierarchical roles and stepping out of line and the consequences of that in a shame-based system, and interbeing, in which one knows the relationship to others and to all, but it's not about hierarchies and shame. Okay. So I've had this opportunity to interact with my cousin as an adult. We're both in our 40s. I think we're adults now. But chronologically we can be adults, but actually there's people who are octogenarians who have not become adults emotionally or psychologically or otherwise. We all know that. So you can get into a bigger, older body without ever becoming an adult. So I sort of got I was really encouraged by this. And then my dad and the older generation had been attending events related to honoring my uncle's death, like whatever they had arranged, Catholic ceremonies, whatever. And so, as was the case for my whole life, like kind of letting the older generation take the lead, since my dad was local, I didn't even think of going myself, partly because right now I don't just hop on a plane and fly across the country on a whim with COVID and just this generational thing. But because of this adult to adult interaction with my cousin and the fact that my cousin had come to my mom's visitation, which was literally just her brother, sister, and our family at the time, because it was in the heart of COVID in 2020. I kind of remember that. And I was like, since I was feeling very adult in our relationship and our interaction and sharing some vulnerabilities about grief and our experiences, I took it upon myself to contact my cousin and say, can you tell me the details about this upcoming thing you're doing for your dad? And it was in Chicago, and it was, coming up. And he said, well, your dad isn't coming because he's not going to be here. He's going to be out of the country. And I said, well, I was actually asking because I was considering going. And so that's the scenario. And so without getting into too many more details about the specifics of what happened next was I had this scenario where I'm interacting with someone from his mother from the older generation. And I was faced with an integrity issue where I was being told, not asked, but it was announced that I was going to play certain roles in this day related to things that they had planned. And this was just laid out, and this was being laid out by a member of the older generation. So I what I got to experience by having it by text, so it was slower, like there was time for me to process what was happening. If it were in real time, I'm sure I would have reverted to one of the conditioned childhood responses and reflexes that are in my system, and I wouldn't have had time to really see the options and see what's going on and move through different layers of this. As it turned out, I got to see that when I grew up in a non-consensual environment as a child. There was absolutely no consent given for anything that happened to me. So I don't even know what that is, to give consent. I don't know what it is to be asked when it comes to these family hierarchical things. I have no idea what it is like to be asked for my consent or to give my consent, because it was never part of the picture. There's no such thing. And I'm going to just let all of you listening reflect on that, on your own childhood. And it's going to depend on your own family and your own experience, whether you had consent as part of that or not. And so think about that being my reality, that I only realized after having to reflect on this. But this situation presents itself where an adult, I'm also an adult, but when it comes to these situations, I'm back in the role of the younger generation listening to somebody from a upper generation, which in the Confucian or any shame-based hierarchical role system means that person is always right, and you have no right to say anything if you're going to follow the rules and be the good Asian daughter. But here's somebody saying something, not asking, saying, "This is what you're going to do, Lisa." And I'm in my adult self, in my adult body, looking at this, also aware of the child role. So I have my adult and my child in me both looking at this scenario. And I get to respond. Not fun, not easy. A lot came up. I felt like I was feeling the emotions and unspoken and unacted upon reactions of generations of women from all cultures in this scenario. I'm sorry, I'm twitching. I just have an itch on my back. Okay. I don't have like a tick or anything. So in a non-consensual environment, you're not asked, you're told. And as an adult, my adult self now committing and committed to for I can't even say the number of years at this point because there's just been so many steps, but I'll say consciously committed to fully living my authentic expression in life for 12 years out of 46. I am not going to just be back when I'm be back in my 6-year-old self and just agree to something that is not in alignment with my values or what I want to do. I mean, it doesn't even have to be values. It's like, I don't want to do that. It's enough. I'm allowed to say, I don't want to do that. Even if someone doesn't ask, if they tell me to do something, I get to say and have the feeling that I don't want to do it. And here I am quoting from this important book, Recovering from Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay Gibson, which is, it's not like I wouldn't say it's like this amazing manual of whatever, but I like her Bill of Rights for adult children of emotionally immature parents, because it's like, oh, wow, I didn't realize I had these rights. I didn't realize I had any rights when it came to my parents, like the child version of me, because it's a non-consensual environment. There's no asking, there's telling, and you don't talk back, and nobody asked, and nobody wants to know what you really want. You just do it. And at the same time, it was a very strong value to develop self-reliance and um, and critical analytical thinking at the same time, and to step up and become like a leader at the same time as being a very compliant son or daughter. Conflict. So I had the experience of getting to craft a text message in response to this that expressed from my adult self. That was fun. Good thing I had like a whole day on my hands to just craft that. But I did it to honor myself and to get clear on what I was really saying, because I knew it was going to be twisted, because I knew intuitively, I didn't have the words at the time, but every defense in my body knew that I was going to be shamed for saying that I didn't want to do what this person was telling me to do, what she had decided I was going to do. So every fiber of my being was in fight or flight, knowing that I had to defend and be careful in expressing everything very, very precisely. So when I described this to a friend of mine who's a therapist, she's like, wow, that's like the hyper vigilant, like perfect adult that had to come into play. Yes. I had to become the perfect person to come up with a response that was absolutely without reproach, like could not be attacked in any way in response to this. Just to get out of, and I don't even want to share the specifics of what I was being asked to do, because it will sound like ridiculous. But that's why I started with understanding trying to share the hierarchical roles of what we're talking about here. This is an elder, this is a family member, but not by blood, but by marriage, but still a family member that's older. And all of the scripts about respect were in play. So I got the experience of speaking up and crafting something that was absolutely respectful and accurate and honoring of my feelings and how I was seeing the situation. And I slept on it and I sent it the next day, and I experienced the feeling in my body, which is always, in my experience, when I have a fear of shame, and I need to find the words, and I find those words and I speak them. After I speak them, I have a clearing in my body. And then, of course, there's what happens when the response comes back. But actually, it was one step at a time, right? I had to speak first. So that's why the texting actually slowed it down a little bit and gave it space so I could take care of myself and breathe and feel, instead of being in lockdown defense mode. So then I got the response, which was, it felt shaming. And I had to, there were different reads that I had on it over the next few days as I sat with it. But it definitely was similar to responses I've gotten in the past, where when people who take this position of authority and non-consensual direction to others and non-consideration of others' humanity, when you call them out on that, they become very defensive and try to find the holes in your argument. And that happened with this person. And so I really got to sit with everything and realize all of my options, and I was writing out affirmations like, it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to take care of your energy. It's amazing the journey I went on. And it's also amazing how much of the detail of that I have since forgotten because as of yesterday, I completely cleared the situation from my plate and did a ritual art making that for the first time in my life, I did my own ritual art making on like writing out the shame-based beliefs and behaviors that were associated with this that I burned through. And I literally wrote them on pieces of paper, cut them up, and burned them, and then incorporated them into a piece of art yesterday. So I can't even go into all the details, which is good. But what I do want to say about shame, when you grow up in these family systems where it's baked into how everyone relates to each other, and then if you wake up and become an adult who loves who you are and practices self care, self acknowledgement, self love, self regard, self compassion, all those words, and you actually speak up and just say what you prefer or what you desire or what you think or what you feel or what you see, you discover very quickly who is still in the web of shame and has no voice and is locked into their role. And no matter what they think or feel or see, they're not going to say it or do it in that system because they've agreed to stay inside their role. And no matter if it's somebody above them, they're not going to break rank. And then you discover what is at stake for you when you do want to show up or refuse to show up inauthentically in a role and insist upon showing up as your full human self, which includes the role, but does not include blindly doing things that are out of alignment just because of the role. So I have cleared an amazing amount of energy since moving through this. It took up all of my energy and more for kind of an intense 4 days to 4 to 5 days. But I'm so grateful for it because for the first I had to feel everything in my body. I had to feel the impulse of the child in me who never got to speak up. I had to feel what it is to speak up from my adult self. And then I had to see the response and to feel how painful it is to have been the child who had no adult advocate saying, yes, we are human. We get to speak up in this system. And it's not just about hierarchical roles, it's a tremendous amount of rage. I also gained this other level of understanding of my mom, who mainly expressed herself through rage in her life. And I'm sure faced so many of these situations that I just described, probably on a daily basis, her whole life, and never had concepts, models, um, support, permission, cultural, societal acceptance of any kind in acknowledging the validity of any of her feelings. And it came out as raw, unprocessed rage. It doesn't make any of the consequences of that go away, which were very real, but it makes me really understand the humanity of what she might have been experiencing, which I will never know because it wasn't available to her to express to me. So I'm projecting human to human understanding. Um, and that is healing for me to just get deeper into that. It doesn't heal or fix the past, but it heals my current relationship with the idea of who my mother was or why she was the way she was. And also the parts of me that are like her and that I learned from her and inherited from her and my relationship with that part of myself. So that's where I got today on it. I'm going to stop because it's already 25 minutes. And I'll have more to say on shame because now I see it as so baked into some of these things, which were opened up and revealed to me in this very instance, these last few days, literally will have impact on and have already had impact on my energy in the world, in doing everything that I am doing in my life and dreaming of doing, and also have been resistant to doing, have roots inside this type of system of subtle shaming. It wouldn't be subtle probably to someone who doesn't um, live inside this anymore or doesn't have that kind of a childhood. But those of us who did have that shame based family system, it's insidious. It's like baked into every single communication and interaction, and we take it to be normal. And when we, so that's why I wanted to share that waking up to it is extremely powerful. And unfortunately, I don't believe you can make it happen. It just, you know, you can become aware of it and then hold it as a something that you know about, but then who knows when that situation is going to come up when you can really work through it and feel it in your body and make a new relationship with it. So that's all I have to say right now, and more to come.